Welcome to today's episode of DarshanTalks, your go-to podcast for the latest in medical affairs, regulatory updates, and legal perspectives. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. Today, we're diving into the critical discussion on how drug and device companies can engage with payers and providers, and the latest updates associated with these interactions. Before we get into the details, a quick shout out to our sponsor, the Kulkarni Law Firm. We focus on drug and device law and offer invaluable guidance to ensure that you comply with these complex regulations. So let's start with the basics of the regulatory framework and talk about the First Amendment and FDA regulations. The FDA's ability to engage in speaker and content-based restrictions is limited by the First Amendment, and it protects free speech, including commercial speech. Now, the FDA can regulate drug and device marketing to ensure that communications are not false or misleading, but it must balance this with constitutional protections. So let's talk about what's called the CFL Guidance. This FDA guidance focuses on medical device and medical product communications that are consistent with FDA-required labeling. Known as the CFL Guidance, it provides a framework for evaluating whether communications about approved products, now this is important, the approved products part, and it contains information not in the FDA required labeling, but is consistent with that labeling. So remember, it's about an approved product. It must be consistent with the labeling of that approved product. Key factors that determine the FDA's perspective on whether the information is aligned with the FDA approved indications includes patient populations, usage directions, and potential for harm. So what are the key takeaways? Companies are still struggling with this guidance because of the high penalties imposed by the FDA, CMS, OIG, and DOJ for noncompliance. So even though this guidance exists, companies are not necessarily taking the first step in. I'm talking to companies, they are all discussing how to make it work. But now remember, it's been 6 years since this guidance, and we still don't have any concrete steps. So there is a chilling effect. Remember, even though it's non-binding, companies must take concrete steps to ensure that there's a compliance program around this guidance. Now, to make that happen, think about the DOJ's new requirements around compliance programs and make sure that you adhere to these compliance program requirements. Let's now talk about the FDAMA 114 guidance, or the Payer Communication Guidance. In 2018, the FDA put out a guidance on device and drug manufacturer communications with payers and provides clarity on how manufacturers can share healthcare economic information regarding both approved and unapproved products with payers. So again, this is about both approved and approved products, but the key is the audience is payers. So while the CFL guidance was not necessarily with payers, it was with healthcare providers in general. It's a broader guidance. This FDAMA 114 guidance applies to payers. The goal is to ensure that communications are truthful and not misleading, and must be based on what's called the CAR standard, which is it must be competent and reliable scientific evidence. Now let's talk about the PI Act. The Prescription Drug and Medical Device Pre-Approval Information Exchange Act, also known as the PI Act, because let's be honest, it's kind of a mouthful. It bridges the communication gap between drug developers and healthcare payers. So again, it builds on that FDAMA 114 guidance, and it allows for pre-approval information exchange about investigational drugs. The key piece on this act was it facilitates early planning and budgeting by payers and provides data on clinical trial phases, economic implications, and anticipated approval timelines. It enables companies to talk to each other to make smart decisions that are going to benefit patients. Now let's talk about the latest guidance, the SIUU guidance. In 2023, the FDA released a guidance that's titled Communications from Firms to Healthcare Providers Regarding Scientific Information on Unapproved Uses of Approved or Cleared Medical Products. So again, it's unapproved uses of approved products or cleared products. And it focuses on the communication of scientific information about the unapproved uses of approved products. Now remember, this is complicated because of the fact that it relates to the scientific information. It raises all kinds of FDA concerns and raises all kinds of scrutiny issues related to speaker and content-based restrictions. Now, The key goal is that healthcare providers must have access to the latest scientific data to make informed decisions, even if the informed decision pertains to unapproved uses. The FDA concedes the fact that sometimes the standard of care are unapproved uses of an approved product. So companies that are engaging these conversations must ensure that SIUU communications are truthful, non-misleading, and separate from promotional communications. And they actually talk about a bunch of different ways to achieve that. I actually have a white paper that I'm putting out on this topic. Feel free to reach out to me if you want a copy of that. But I have that, and it gets into some of the details, some of the lawsuits that are coming out, and how this is significantly more complicated. Now, there are a bunch of different guidances, as we've mentioned, a law here, and you need to compare each of these. So when you compare the PI Act to the SIUU guidance, the PI Act targets pre-approval communications with payers, while the SIUU guidance focuses on unapproved uses of approved products with healthcare providers. The PI Act versus the CFL guidance, the PI Act the PI Act addresses pre-approval phase communications, while CFL guidance deals with post-approval communications about approved products, but it includes information not in the FDA-required labeling. And then you take the SIUU versus the CFL guidance. I see them as part of this overarching theme, this continuum, if you will. The SIUU guidance relates to unapproved uses of approved products, while the CFL guidance covers broader communications consistent with FDA-approved uses. So what are the implications for medical affairs and HEOR programs? Now, obviously, your medical affairs team needs to develop robust strategies for communicating scientific. Your medical affairs team needs to develop robust strategies for communicating scientific data in a compliant manner, ensuring accuracy and non-misleading information. HEOR teams similarly must focus on robust research methodologies and clear communication of findings. Remember, your FDAMA 114 guidance and your PI Act will primarily apply to your HEOR programs, while your medical affairs team will focus on the communications to healthcare professionals as a whole. Now, there are all kinds of legal issues that pop into place. And again, there are lawsuits that talk about this idea that doctors are smart enough to get information if they are on a formulary committee, but not if they're not on a formulary committee. These are legal fictions that courts are actually not completely convinced should exist the way they currently do. Again, to do this, you need to have the appropriate legal oversight. Feel free to reach out to us at the Kulkarni Law Firm. We provide unparalleled guidance to ensure compliance with the PI Act, the SIUU guidance, and CFL requirements. And again, we want to help you develop robust communication strategies that minimize legal risks and ensure timely, compliant information dissemination. So let's talk about what this already means. Engaging with payers and providers effectively requires understanding and navigating not just regulatory updates, but legal updates. And now, in light of the DOJ requirements, compliance issues as well. It's essential to do all of this to avoid legal pitfalls and ensure successful communication. Reach out to us at the Kulkarni Law Firm. We're happy to help you. And thank you for listening to Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. Until next time, stay informed, stay compliant.